What's up, guys? Welcome back to another AHJ Productions video. I am Aiden, and today I will be breaking down the Cincinnati Bengals. Jonah just recently did a breakdown on the Washington football team, if you guys have not seen that already. And Hunter just recently did a breakdown of the Chicago Bears. So go check those out if you guys have not already. Please leave a like down below. If you enjoyed the video, please subscribe. We would greatly appreciate it. And comment down below some suggestions for some teams that you'd want to see next. We are breaking down every NFL, NBA, and MLB team. And let's get going with the breakdown of the Cincinnati Bengals. And we're going to start off hot. We're going to go to the quarterback position, and we're going to talk about the number one pick in the 2020 NFL Draft, Joe Burrow. We look at some of his numbers last season. He completed 76.3% of his passes. That is insane. 5,671 yards, 60 touchdowns to 6 interceptions, and a quarterback rating of 202. What? He was incredible last season. Greatest season we've ever seen from a college quarterback. We look at some of his PFF stats. Only 2% of his passes were interception worthy. 90% of them were catchable. He's arguably one of the best quarterbacks of the PFF era. Since 2014, he is number one in under pressure passes. He is number one in throws of 10 plus yards. He is number one in creating outside the pocket. And he has a total PFF rating of 94.3. Comparing to Trevor Lawrence had a 91.5. And Trevor Lawrence is the surefire number one pick next year, I believe. So I don't know, man. Joe Burrow is the man. Bengals fans, look out. I think this is your quarterback of the future. He's one of the smartest players I've ever seen, and he's improved greatly. Went from a third string at Ohio State to the starter at LSU, and he showed that he was that guy. So moving on to the running back position next, we have Joe Mixon, Giovanni Bernard, and Rodney Anderson. And then lower on the depth chart, we have Trevion Williams, Samaje Perine, and Jaquez Patrick. I think the main three here are Joe Mixon, Giovanni Bernard, and Trevion Williams. Joe Mixon is a good running back. I wouldn't call him elite yet. I think he's a good running back. He's going to put up good numbers each and every year. He was good at Oklahoma, ran into some problems, but we're not going to touch on that. Giovanni Bernard has been a quality back throughout his entire career. I don't think he should start on any team, but I think he's definitely a quality backup. And then Trevion Williams was good at Texas A&M. I think he's very underrated. I think he's a very good third-string running back for them. And then guys like Rodney Anderson, Samaje Perine, and Jaquez Patrick, they're not really going to get touches. So I wouldn't really worry too much about those guys. And then moving on to the wide receivers. And some of these guys include A.J. Green, Tyler Boyd, John Ross, T. Higgins, and Auden Tate. Let's start off with A.J. Green. Arguably one of the best receivers in the NFL. I believe he's top 10. Some people may say top 7 and maybe top 5. I don't know. It's a tough argument because there's so many good receivers in the NFL. But A.J. Green has had an 1,000-yard season every season in his career except for 2016 and 2018, where in 2016 he had 964 yards in just 10 games, and in 2018 he had 694 yards in just 9 games. A.J. Green is an incredible player. I think Joe Burrow is going to be a great refreshment for him. Andy Dalton was not really the guy in Cincinnati, even though he played there forever, but I think Joe Burrow is going to be great for A.J. Green. I think A.J. Green is going to be good for Joe Burrow. So I think this is going to be a combo to look for next season. And then we move on to a guy like Tyler Boyd. And I would compare Tyler Boyd to a guy like Kenny Golladay, where they were low on the depth chart. They didn't really play much. And then as they got more and more and more receptions and more opportunities, they just became these great players. Kenny Golladay is one of the top receivers in the league. I think Tyler Boyd is on that path. He's been outstanding, great player, high expectations for him. Then we move on to John Ross, former 9th overall pick in the 2017 NFL Draft. He has not lived up to the hype. He's got speed going for him, not much else. He needs to work on his hands. He needs to work on his route running. Is he an okay player? Yeah. but he does need to work on the things that make a good receiver a good receiver. He's got the speed going, but I don't know. If he develops his hands and his route running, like I said, maybe he's a Tyreek Hill type player. Now, don't get your hopes up on that, Bengals fans. I'm not saying he's Tyreek Hill, but develop him into that. Do what you can to develop him into that. You picked him 9th overall, just do what you can. All right? And then we look at a guy like T. Higgins, who they took at the top of the 2nd round this year. I think T. Higgins is a good player. I do think there were better receivers on the board, like Denzel Mims and Michael Pittman Jr., but it's a good value pick. He was good at Clemson. Just adds a little more depth to that receiving core. And then look at a guy like Auden Tate. And Auden Tate came out of nowhere last year. Nobody really expected him to be an impact player for the Bengals. And quite frankly, he played like one of the top receivers. He was very good last year. And, I don't know about top receiver. I don't know about that. But he played better than what people expected is basically my point. But Auden Tate is a pretty good player. He does have the potential to jump guys like John Ross and T. Higgins, but we'll have to see. Moving on to tight end. The tight ends with the Bengals organization right now are CJ Uzomah and Drew Sample. There are more, but these are the guys that I'm just going to highlight. CJ Uzomah is currently the starter, and he is not good enough to be a starter. He's definitely good enough to be a backup, but he should not be starting on any NFL team. He's also paid like a starter, which does not help at all. Tight end is definitely a spot where the Bengals need to look to upgrade. And then they have Drew Sample, who they took in, I believe, the 2nd or 3rd round in the 2019 draft. It was a pretty early pick. But Drew Sample's not very good. He's a blocking tight end. He just doesn't really have as much upside as some of the other tight ends that were on the board at the time. But yeah, tight end is definitely a spot that the Bengals could look to upgrade. And then we're going to move on to the offensive line, where the starters are Billy Price, Jonah Williams, Trey Hopkins, Bobby Hart, and Xavier Su'a-Filo. Billy Price, former 21st overall pick in 2018, hasn't really shown that first-round talent yet. We'll have to see. We're going to have to give him a little more time. Jonah Williams did not play his entire rookie season due to an ACL tear. Hopefully he can be that franchise left tackle for them. And then Trey Hopkins, Bobby Hart, and Xavier Su'a-Filo, they're all replacement level players. They're not very good at all. I think that is definitely a spot that they can look to upgrade in the draft next year. Definitely look at offensive line. This will definitely be I said definitely a ton, but this is for sure a spot that they need to look to upgrade going into the draft, going into free agency, whatever. Moving on to the defensive side of the ball, we're going to start with the defensive ends. And the defensive ends are Carlos Dunlap, Carl Lawson, Sam Hubbard, Khalid Kareem, and more. But we are going to highlight the notable guys here. We're going to start with Carlos Dunlap. Carlos Dunlap, it's time to move on from him. It's time to move on from him. His base salary in 2020 is set to be $7.8 million. That's just too much for what Carlos Dunlap brings to the table at this point in his career. He's just not giving you that production that he used to. I think it's time to move on from him. He's set to make $10.25 million in 2021. Like I said, I think it's time to move on. Carl Lawson, on the other hand, is a great young player. I think he's a guy that you can definitely build around on that defensive line. He has a ton of upside. Wasn't really necessarily a high pick coming out of Auburn, which surprises me. I thought he was an excellent player coming out of Auburn, but I think he's definitely a building piece on that defensive line. And then you look at a guy like Sam Hubbard, who was their 3rd-round pick in 2018. He had 8.5 sacks last year, and he's a rotational guy. He was tied for 27th in the league in sacks last year. That's pretty good for a guy that's not playing every single snap. So Sam Hubbard, a decent player. Maybe he's a building piece. I'm not sure. We're going to have to see a few more years out of him, just see what he can bring to the table. And then you have Khalid Kareem, who they took in the 5th round. I'm not too sure as to what he's going to do. I don't really think he's going to get too much playing time, but we'll have to see. Maybe a few injuries down the line, maybe get some playing time. I don't know. We'll have to see. Moving on to defensive tackles, the top 2 defensive tackles, the main guys we're going to talk about are Geno Atkins and DJ Reader. Geno Atkins is an excellent player. He has been through his entire career, but he's 32 years old. It's going to be time to move on from him very soon. he's going to regress. That's usually how it goes with defensive tackles. Is that a surefire thing? No. But with defensive tackles, they usually don't last their entire career. And then DJ Reader was an excellent player in Houston. I think he was an excellent acquisition for the Cincinnati Bengals team. I think he's going to help send a lot of pressure to the quarterback. And I think he's a huge help for that defense. And then we're going to move on to the linebackers, where it is not great. Josh Bynes, Jordan Evans, Jermaine Pratt, Logan Wilson, their third-round pick, and Akeem Davis-Gaither, their fourth-round pick. Of course, there are more, but these are the guys I'm going to highlight. It's not good. It's not looking very good. I have high hopes for Jermaine Pratt and Logan Wilson. Jermaine Pratt was drafted as a bit of an older guy, but I do think he's a pretty good player. You got to give him some opportunities. And then Logan Wilson, we haven't seen him play in the NFL yet. I liked what I saw from him at Wyoming. So I would definitely look out for him. But other than that, linebacker is definitely a spot that the Bengals need to look to upgrade. It's just not looking great. Moving on to the defensive backs, we're going to start with cornerbacks, where the most notable guys are McKenzie Alexander, William Jackson III, Darius Phillips, and Trey Wayne. McKenzie Alexander is a decent player. He was all right in Minnesota. Wasn't good, wasn't bad. He's just going to go out there and he's going to cover well for you. He's not going to be a perennial Pro Bowler or anything, but he's going to go out there and do what he can. He's a decent role player. William Jackson III, I have high hopes for. He only had one interception last year, but interceptions are not really everything. William Jackson is a very good coverage corner, mainly zone coverage. But William Jackson III, I definitely have high hopes for. I think he's definitely a building piece that Bengals fans can have on that defense. Just look to get, I would say, one more guy around him, and I think your cornerback group would be pretty nice. Trey Wayne's not really living up to that first round hype, but he did develop a little bit in his last few years in Minnesota. Don't expect too much out of him, but he's a decent role player as well. And Darius Phillips isn't that good. He's not really going to play too much either, so I wouldn't really worry about him. And then moving on to safeties, we've got guys like Jesse Bates, Von Bell, and Sean Williams. Jesse Bates is one of the best young safeties in football. Free safety is not a spot that the Bengals need to look to upgrade. Jesse Bates is phenomenal. I would definitely look to build around him. And then Von Bell has not really lived up to that hype that he was given when he was coming out of Ohio State, but in his last few years with the Saints, he picked it up a bit. So we'll have to see if he can kind of rejuvenate and play at that high level that people thought he would coming out of college. And then Sean Williams is not really going to play too much for you. He's been with Cincinnati for a good bit now, but I think it's going to be time to move on from Sean Williams pretty soon because of his contract. I think he's making a little more money than you would want a backup safety to make. But yeah, all in all, safety is, I would not say, the number one priority in Cincinnati. I think they've got some decent players there. And then on special teams, your kicker's Randy Bullock and your punter's Kevin Huber. Randy Bullock's an okay kicker, and Kevin Huber's Kevin Huber. So with all that said, let's see what the Bengals could look to do in the 2021 draft. The number one guy I believe they should target is Micah Parsons, linebacker out of Penn State. Micah Parsons is a great impact player. He did just recently opt out of the 2020 NFL season, but we might not NFL season, college football season, but we're not going to have a season. We're not going to have a season. That's the bottom line. I know the Big Ten isn't, at least, and the Big 12, and but anyway, Micah Parsons is a great player. I think he would fit the Cincinnati system very well. And if the Bengals are picking at the top of the draft, I think that's a very good player to look at. And then another guy to look at is Penei Sewell, tackle out of Oregon. I think solidifying that offensive line is definitely a big priority for them, or at least should be. And Penei Sewell is one of the best players in the draft. He's shown a lot of upside at Oregon, and I think he would be an excellent pick for the Cincinnati Bengals. So all in all, I think the Bengals are going to be a pretty decent team over the next few seasons. I think they're going to be mediocre their first few years with Joe Burrow, and then maybe if they get a few pieces, then they can become one of the better, maybe even dominant teams if they just solidify some of these holes. But overall, Bengals fans, look out. I think you guys have a bright future. That's going to do it for this one, guys. Again, drop a like if you enjoyed. Please subscribe and comment down below your suggestions of what teams you would want next. And we'll see you guys later.